three, and I want to sort of first recap that so far we gave a little intro. I will give you more information about that in a second, but we talked about kind of the steps of this reinvention process. And step one was really kind of looking at what you want, thinking about why you want what you want, and all the different things we want, the different things that we want that we already have, the different things that we want that we don't, quote unquote, have, and how we've gotten ourselves to the point so far of the success in the world that we live in our own lives. And that's what we call our patterns of power or our winning strategy. So as we talk today, I'll go over those two steps. And then day three is about forging the key to the next step. And that's a really fun process. We get to feel sort of like a spy today or a underground mover by forging this key, because it's a mystery in a way. It's a trick, and we have to sort of trick our brains, as we've been talking about the past few days, which I will bring us up to speed. Today is about forging the key and entering the abyss, or as I like to call it, Abyss Day. Okay, so Abyss Day. Let's start here. I will give us a recap, and then we'll move into Abyss Day. This is Thomas Cole's Expulsion from the Garden from 1828. Just a glorious example of romantic American Hudson Valley River school painting. It is dark. It is moody. We can see Adam and Eve there, the little teeny figures being the door being, kicked out. Don't let the door hit you when you go out kind of feeling. And there is, the Holy Spirit or God or whatever you want to call it, stabbing them in the back with those beautiful rays of light that they're not going to see anymore. So Adam and Eve have been expelled from the garden, and outside they see, this abyss, this big, deep hell hole. We don't know what's down there, right? There are dead trees everywhere. The light isn't, really on them. They don't have the fruit. They're going to have to make by the sweat of their brow, they're going to have to create their living. So this painting, on the left, it's dark. On the right, it's light, which of course is no coincidence. This idea that we have this yin and yang, this light and dark, this good and bad, especially in Western philosophy, as far as sin goes, but in Eastern philosophy as far as yin and yang goes. So I want to compare and contrast that a little bit to one of my favorite paintings and painters, Franz Klein. So this is the abstract version. Now, once you've seen Expulsion from the Garden, it's hard not to see it here. It's hard not to see the abyss, gaping in front of us, the little shards of light that are sort of coming in from heaven or God or the mind or the beyond. So I just want you to keep these two paintings and these two ideas in mind as we talk about the abyss and what it is, what it gives us, what its wisdom is, and how we can make our way through it today. Okay, so review. First, the three basic concepts that I first talked about were the four hats, which is my concept of the person in business or project where we move from the foundation to the future, from our inner work to the outer world. And it's a sort of hero's journey itself. And it breaks down business and entrepreneurship and projects into four sort of easier sections and easier kind of hats to wear or archetypes to put on. Okay. As we talk about the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell, we first, to review, we are the hero. We are the hero in this journey. We need to be the unwilling hero to start out on any journey. Every hero is unwilling at the beginning. So if you're unwilling, if you're resisting, you're in the right place as far as your own personal new journey, new reinvention goes. Because we must be unwilling at the beginning. That's how we become a hero. We meet some supernatural aid. We cross a threshold into the underworld. You know, just like I said, Dorothy goes to see the gypsy. She gets a little supernatural aid, but she realizes, but it's not real supernatural aid. It's a little bit fake, right? Then she really enters the abyss. Then she really has to go on her adventure. The third concept was my concept of the 8 creative elements, which combines the Platonic forms, the Western earth, air, fire, water, and light, with the yin and yang here in the middle, this void and the light, with the Chinese concepts of sort of the elemental phases of metal, which is the human element to me, and the wood, which is the natural element. So all of these together, I call the 8 creative elements, which very conveniently make up our color wheel. So the hero's journey is a color wheel. And it really kind of helps me to break it down this way, to think about a lot of things. And I use this to sort of like overlay a lot of ideas and concepts for myself. So I will now give you sort of the big picture of where we're going, which I haven't done up to this point. Okay, up to this point, you've seen first we seeded our dream. We dreamed a little bit about what we want to do. We talked about patterns of power and our winning strategies and why they're not always going to help us to the next phase. And we're going to talk about forging the key and entering the abyss today. But beyond that, next is going to be, once we've passed through that darkest part of the abyss, I want you to know there's hope, okay? The muses will come to our aid. We will be in the wood. We will have a voice, which I don't have very much right now, but we will have an idea and a voice of what gifts we can bring back to our people to heal them, which of course is what the hero's journey does. And then we will come above ground again into that light, and we will decide what systems, how we want our ideas to flow, and how we're going to frame this impossible infinite game for ourselves. Then we will pull that key out, and we will turn the key and start over. Okay, so that's the goal by Friday. So I want you to know that if you stick around, that you will be along for this ride. Okay, so review again. We have our diagrams, our frameworks, and we were reviewing about getting stuck within your winning strategy. Okay, so this idea of the hero's journey is, the known world, the abyss, and return. So in the known world, this is where we get stuck in the mini myth, I call it, of success, acceptance, and comfort. We decide that this is where Adam and Eve would be if they stayed in the garden, okay? We decide that life is good, life is easy, things are working. See, I'm doing great, I'm succeeding. I am in my world that I've built so carefully. And often, this is these patterns of success. Sometimes we resist social expectations, and sometimes we live within them. But we create a world that works for us. Now, we may have some small pains. We may have some big pains. We will go over this big, hero's journey many times in our lives, and some people have worse traumas than others. But what I want to point out here is the idea that getting stuck in this mini myth of success and acceptance and comfort is our brain kind of tricking us and thinking of, you've gone through a lot. You've done your abyss work, right? You've done it all. And now you've come back around. But sometimes, I'm not saying you have or haven't, but sometimes we get stuck in this winning strategy and we keep doing it and thinking that we're really kind of doing that harder work that we need to do, but we're not. Okay, so the snake in the garden is not the abyss. We just think it is. Okay, that snake that offered Eve the apple, right? Or that then Adam, believed her and took a bite as well, right? That wasn't the hard part. That wasn't the big problem, the big drama. The drama is what happens next. Okay, so we can be stuck in that pleasurable world, the known world, right? We're above ground, where social expectations are there. We use our obligations and, this victimhood of like, everybody needs something from me as a buffering tool, right? To avoid our work, and to not take our own power. And the only way that's going to change is if we make some real big decisions that people might be pissed off about, as some of you know. Okay, but this is the devil We are stuck in pleasure and success and things are working. Or you remember my friend who I talked about, whose child went through a lifetime, 25 to 30 years of disease and feeling like she was going to die. She almost died like 7 times. And then she finally died. She had lots of hope. She got a transplant and then she lived with it for a while and she died. So my friend is not stuck in pleasure. She's gone down into the abyss, truly. She's stuck in the abyss. She doesn't know how to come up into real life again, to regular life. She's struggling with that. It feels comfortable to be in this pain. It feels comfortable to be in this place. I can be the victim because there's no way out for me. I'm still living this. Okay, so wherever we are on the wheel, we can find that victimhood, right? We always can. Our brain always wants to do that. Okay, so today, that mini myth, stuck in pleasure, or pain, the patterns of strategy are helping you avoid something. Okay, so remember, what are we thinking about? What are we trying to avoid? As we talked about this yesterday. And I want you to sort of like, just physically raise your hand to say, did you think about this last night? What are you trying to avoid? And if you did find something of insight, put it into the chat. I would love to I'm not going to stop the conversation now, but as we go, I will. I'd love to hear more about it. What did you find that you were avoiding? That's like a big part of your winning strategy, right? Our winning strategy is there to help us succeed and help us to avoid something, maybe more than one thing. For me, as I told you, I get to, I'm going to read this off my little sheet that I'm going to show you, but let's see. This is what I listen for. I need help. So I can breeze in, fix it, and flee. So I can avoid being trapped. Okay, so that was my winning strategy to avoid being trapped. And I think from me, it came from my strict upbringing, my religion that was very strict. And so I always want to avoid that. Now, it has good and bad benefits, as I talked about yesterday. It can keep me learning new things and always going to the next thing, but it can also help me avoid having to finish anything. I've written 3 books. I have 4 more in me. One's done, one's half done. I have a body of work going, right. We talked about this yesterday. All these different things, paintings, poetry, essays. I need to find ways to trap myself. So I'm going to look in the chat and see what people said about being trapped or about, sorry, the things that you're avoiding. Let's see. Okay, good. First, Seattle, Port Ludlow. Wonderful. Hi, Kelly. I'm so happy to have you here. Orcas Island again. Hi, Matt. Janine. Oh my gosh, so excited to hear you, see you here. Susan. Um, okay. That's fine if you need to leave, come and go. Orange Beach, Alabama. Oh my gosh, how exciting to have friends from other places. Seattle, Ireland. Avoiding failure. Okay. Avoiding failure. All right. Well, I have news for you today, Matt, that you're not going to be able to avoid failure. All right. That's today's message. But let's dig into it because I don't have that problem. All right. It's really interesting how we all have different problems. We want to have new problems. The goal is to have new problems. I want to have the problem that I fear failure, right? So what I need to do is create traps for myself where I can really fail and feel that failure. You may need to first, of course, feel the failure, Matt, and then find a new problem to have. Okay, so this is what we're going to talk about today. Avoiding finishing things to avoid negative result. Is my work not good enough? Self-worth and compare and despair, right? Comparison and that element of am I good enough is such a huge problem. Avoiding looking at the self-worth issue is so key for so many people. That's the abyss, right? That's the abyss for so many artists too. Okay, so let's move on a little bit. We're going to talk about what it means to forge the key. So taking these failures, right? The avoiding the feeling of failure, the unworthy of attention, which is different than just unworthy, right? It's like you can be off in the corner, feeling okay with yourself, but you just feel unworthy of attention from others. That's different. That's really interesting. Okay, so forging the key, that's metal. That's the human element. Now, when you watch spy shows, this is what we do. They take the key and they, slip it in their pocket and they press it into that clay. The one on the right is soap. There are these backwards impressions. It's almost like an Alice in Wonderland space that you enter. Okay, so when we avoid something, what are we doing but managing our emotions? And Jung talks about this as the shadow and the complexes. Okay, so as we go, when you think about the hero's journey, I want you to think about the archetypes, of course. So Carol S. Pearson, she took the work of Carl Jung and Joseph Campbell and the archetypes, the hero's journey, and she started to write these books. Here's one called Awakening the Hero Within. I'm not sure you can see this. Sorry. Awakening the hero within. Heroes within. Heroes, that's important that it's more than one hero. So what she talks about here are all of the different aspects and elements of the self as different manifestations. Okay. Now, I'm sure some of you as artists and poets and writers have sort of done this work and looked into archetypes and read about this and experimented with it and thought about it in terms of your own work. But I do want to just sort of make sure that we revisit this before we move on. Okay, so here we are up at the top. There's the hero. Now, it's ironic that the hero is at the top of this, hero's journey, not the hero yet, right? Because first off, the hero jumps to become the innocent. And I love the work that some of the people in this room have actually done on this, including Janine, Kelly. So you're going to know more about this than me, perhaps. But I just am going to do a brief touch on it. So the hero must be unwilling. The hero becomes the innocent to move through this journey. This is Dorothy, right? Before she goes to Oz. And then she becomes the explorer. She goes down into the underground. She meets the sage. She meets the magician. And of course, she meets the jester. This is an interesting archetype that really holds up a mirror to society and shows us our absurdity. Then she has that romantic sort of falling in love. This is where that you talk about, like, the therapist goes to the person goes to the therapist and they fall in love with their therapist, right? It's that bonding with parts of what's happening around them and that personality. But of course, the lover can become the addict. So then they come up again above ground. They become a normal human being again. They decide that they want to bring something back to their tribe. And then only then can they really become the hero and the ruler. Okay, so that's the hero's journey, but inside that, the shadow self, the shadow element of all of these characters are sort of the opposite. Sometimes not even really the opposite, but the hero with, worst intentions or pride or ego, the 7 deadly sins, can become the villain. The innocent can be the victim and stay in that victimhood, right? Where we get in that mini myth. The explorer becomes unmoored, doesn't have really direction, doesn't have a purpose, becomes the drifter. The sage thinks that they know too much, and they become the hypocrite, or they become just arrogant. The magician can become that trickster, which is different than the jester, but the magician can become someone who takes advantage, okay? And the trickster, and these words are used in different cultures, different ways. So for instance, the trickster is the raven, right? Is the fox. So that's the type of magician that isn't necessarily bad or have bad intentions. She just doesn't have the same social norms as everyone else does. And so therefore will put someone in a situation where they're off their moorings for a purpose. Okay, again, the jester can become that troll under the bridge with bad intentions in order to, the witch eats the children kind of a thing. The lover becomes the addict. The everyday, person becomes the fake or the faker who tries to take advantage of people who think that they know, that they're everyday. Oh, I'm just a farmer. I'm just a regular old farmer. I wouldn't do anything bad, kind of a deal. Then the caregiver can become the enabler if they get stuck in this routine, in this mini myth. And then the ruler, of course, can become the tyrant. So we're seeing this play out in our own culture right now. And, I want to acknowledge that everybody here is taking a next step because we don't want to be a victim, right? We want to be empowered by our own work and by big A art. And by big A, art will offer us a way to create something new in the world. Okay. I'm just looking at the chat really quick. Pam, yes, as a quick start, which is a Kolbe, one of the Kolbe test results, someone who doesn't really care about risk very much, and that's me too. I also avoid finishing projects to avoid the responsibilities and commitments that come with putting them out there, the vulnerability, opening to judgment, rejection from others. This is also good and so complicated and yet so simple. So thank you for sharing those. Okay, so we have now forged our key but we don't have the key yet. We just have the idea of the key. The key is what you are avoiding. Okay, so really write that down on your paper in big letters. Okay, so for me, it's entrapment. I can avoid a lot of other things, but let's take one thing at a time, right? And what emotions am I managing by avoiding entrapment? Okay, so let's talk about that for a second. First, what happens in our brain when we see something. This is our brain first assigning meaning to a circumstance. And those of you who are in my program and in coaching will understand this as sort of a way to look at the self-coaching model that I talk about, which the first element of it is the C line, circumstance. Now, circumstances are neutral until we have a thought about it. Okay, so something happens in the world. And then we have a thought about it. Now, death can be neutral as well. We know this because if a certain person died, we all might be very happy. If another person died, we would be very sad. Okay, so we know that's why our thoughts and our emotions create meaning around neutral events. Okay, so something happens in the present. Our brain assigns a meaning to it and predicts the future from that meaning. Okay. Now we'll unpack this a little bit more, but I'm going to just give you this sort of cycle so you can take a look at it. So the brain is addicted to this interpretation, right? We think something and then we feel something. Sometimes we have a sensation, which is not necessarily an emotion. It can be like a gut punch or a physical feeling or a hunger or a fear, right? Those are more sensations, not, initially emotions. So sometimes the sensation comes first, the thought comes second, the emotion, or the thought comes first, the emotion comes next, and then we start sweating, right? That's the sensation. So it's kind of this thought feeling combo poo-poo platter, all right, of all those things together. And it comes from our brain responding to present circumstances and assigning meaning and then predicting the future. And this is from the research of a neurologist that I can share. I don't have her name right now. She has this great video, but I will remind myself to share that with you. And because the predicting the future is really what they've found, that our brain assigns meaning so we can predict the future. And of course, keep us safe. So 3, we take action, therefore, from the past, because something happens, we go back into the past to assign meaning from what's already happened. Oh, well, that's a red car, therefore it's going to be, and it hit my dog 10 years ago, so therefore I want to avoid red cars. That's oversimplification. But our brain searches back through the history to help assign meaning. If there's fear back there, if there's trepidation, if there's joy, it will find it and predict the future from that. And then we take action from the past based on what we know. Okay, and that creates, so that A is our A line, and that creates our results, which is the manifestation in the world of what we do. Okay, so now it's time to enter the abyss. We have our impression of our key, which is what are we avoiding and what emotions are we avoiding. That knowledge is our key so far, okay? We'll use it better later, but right now at least we know that. We know what our winning strategy is. So we have our winning strategy, how we've worked so far well, to create success. We know what we're avoiding, and we enter the abyss. So what does the abyss do? It's all about what if I fail? What if I die? Stop. Help. This I love this image because this is Botticelli. Let me see. It's Botticelli drawing from the Vatican Library of the abyss, and it's pretty intense there. Okay, the abyss says, "I got news for you. You will fail, Matt O'Brien. Okay, Shannon Borg, you will be trapped. There's no getting out of death. You will die. We all do. Okay. Thank you for being my guinea pig. You're not the only one. The abyss says, abandon hope, all ye who enter here." And this is what Dante read which was over this abyss of, as they entered, I believe. I'll mess this up, but Tracy Goss in her book, and I showed you this yesterday, I don't have it right now, The Last Word on Power, has this fantastic quote, and it just will shock people, right? As long as you see a speck of hope, you have not yet realized the fundamental bleakness required for complete freedom. And this is one of the wisdoms of the abyss. But I want to sort of shock you here. This is not about us becoming depressed, nihilistic, there's nothing, no light left. Because even as we saw in our paintings, there's always light, right? There's always yin and yang. But what we're doing is voluntarily entering this space where we can understand what this quote means. Okay. So once we sort of abandon this hope, this idea of hope, and that means we know we're going to die. In the Sumi wrestler warrior world, they have this concept of dying before battle. That's what this is. Okay, that's what this is all about. It's the concept of, if I can experience all of the emotions of death, failure, being trapped before I go into battle, then what do I have to lose? What would you do if you had no hope, nothing to lose, and you lived your life as fully as possible? Now, even that's not the answer, because as you know, my friend, she got stuck down here. She knows so clearly that we will die. Her daughter died, right? These things happen, but she still got stuck. It wasn't suddenly like the lights went on and, oh, now I can come through the abyss and I can survive it and I have all this wisdom. No, we have to spend some time here. And we have to come to some awarenesses. Okay. So, again, this might be a good time to stop and talk about this for a second, but I want to ask you a couple of questions. When you think of what would you do if you had no hope, nothing to lose? Okay, if you were going to live for 6 months or something. Now, your family doesn't have to hear this. No one has to hear this. But what would you do? Would you move out of your house and move to Paris? Would you go off into a cabin in the woods? Some of us have already done that. You get to live this cycle many times in your life. So this is just this cycle right now, okay? What would you do? Kelly says, I do this on my own without being prompted. I love it. It's so true. Okay, so put in the chat, what would you do if you decided that there was no hope that you were going to live for 3 months? Would you stay right where you are, but would you do anything differently? Would you give up all the marketing and the sales, right, and just make the art? and not sell another thing? Please answer if you feel like it in the chat or on your in your journal. I would hang with my cats. Oh, that's so good. It's so true. Write freely and without fear. That's the key right there, Kevin. I would do less. I think all of us would do less. I think that's clear that we would do less. Okay, anyone else? I would travel. I would, stop worrying so much about money. Um, I have to make money, right? And so we all have to make money, but I would figure out ways, and I've started to do that in my life. Spend more time with my family. Yes, if you're going to, leave, right? So it's sort of this combination of, yeah, we want to get stuck in that success winning strategy of our families and all that beauty. And we want to pursue things that are our own, building more art. Yes. Okay, this is so great. So this is sort of part of that question. If you were to sort of say, what do you really want? And a lot of us here are of a certain age. Okay, we have gone through our own abysses. We've made some of these decisions. But it's really interesting to think about what we really want to do, what we really want to make, and what we really want to be. And just notice your emotions and your body and your brain here. Jen says, I would return into retreat with the ability to do more art. I would too. I would quit chopping up my days so much. I would spend a whole week just painting instead of having this schedule, right? So how can I do that easier? Maybe I take a week off and just tell everyone in the world to go away, create my own retreat, and make that happen for myself. So now we're going to start to think about these things and how to make them happen for yourself. Because, as you know, the abyss does not care. The abyss doesn't care, okay? The abyss is this beautiful place where everything is neutral, where death is neutral, where the yin, the receptive element of life, is just sort of waiting, and it doesn't care. So you get to put on that what meaning you want. We've been conditioned to have this fear of it, to have these very complicated human emotions through our evolutionary biology. But as we know, once we know we can die and all of these things will happen, okay, say I got, my right hand chopped off today, okay? Say that happened. This is so fun, isn't it? I love this conversation. What is the worst thing that can happen? Yes, death. We're all, that's going to happen. Pain, and pain will pass. But the worst thing that really can happen in pretty much any situation is an emotion. And this is what we try to avoid at all costs. The abyss is emotion. Especially if you know you're going to die. You know you're going to lose hope, right? There's no hope. The abyss is the emotions that are brought up around it. That's where we have our suffering. And this is where Buddhism talks about, right? The mind, why the mind creates suffering, because the mind creates emotion. So at this point, we're saying, we're in the abyss and we're saying, help, I've done everything you've asked, right? I've abandoned hope. I've accepted death. I've died before battle. And I've lost entitlement and victimhood that I had at the beginning by all of this. I've been laid bare, right? There's no fixed way that things should be. I'm learning the new ways of the abyss. So this is where we can sort of come up from the bottom again and gain that wisdom of the abyss, which is the willingness to feel any emotion. Okay, so what I'd like to do is sort of close down this conversation and talk to people. Okay, so tomorrow we are going to muster the muses and frame that impossible, infinite game. Okay, so please, like, raise your hand if you would like to talk. I would love to. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here and we'll just have a conversation. Hold on. Hold on. Sorry. Okay. All right, everyone. So would anyone like to talk or share or give input or respond to what I've presented to you today? Laura, our actor. Okay. Jen, would you like to speak? Yeah, you can unmute. Welcome.
Um, this is a very interesting place in my life and a very interesting time that I'm coming to this class. Um, I was, I don't know where to start. Um, I come from a family of artists. I was not picked to be the artist in my family. My brother was picked to be the artist in my family. He did that. And a week before his 30th birthday, he took his own life.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
And so I struggle with my own confidence around being an artist. My folks died early. My dad died um, when I was about 8. My mother died when I was 15. And so I am very fortunate. I've had very good care in my young life, a lot of inspiration and support. So I um, got my first degree in art, didn't do anything with it. It nearly killed my interest in being an artist, actually. And um, went on to get a second degree in landscape architecture, and that's what my career was. And it was a wonderful career. I learned a lot about how to discipline myself, how to um, do a lot of things. But I was able to retire early. I'm now 76. So I retired in my 40s. And before I retired, I discovered my an awakening of art and being an artist. And uh, jumped into it all hands, all feet. And that was the real mm, that really um, was the impetus for diving into an art career.
Mm-hmm.
And um, so I've done that. At the same time, I became a Buddhist.
Oh, interesting. Well, all of this makes a lot of sense to you then, doesn't it?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me. Um, and so I pursued this art career and ended had a lot of success with my work. Um, from many perspectives, it was a great way for me to dive into a lot of things that I hadn't handled in my life very well. So um, then I decided I was asked to come and do some work at a meditation center. So I did that, packed up my car, drove to California, was a resident manager of a wasn't a retreat center, it was a little Dharma center in California for a couple of years. Then I had made a commitment to do a 3-month retreat. So after my lovely old dog died and I got a place to move, um, I made the commitment to do this retreat. Did this retreat on San Juan Island at a little Buddhist retreat center. Ended up staying there for 14 years. And um, sort of put my art in limbo
Hmm.
um, for all of those years.
So now
And
you're revitalizing it, or you're at the point where this work is sort of like this is next.
this is next. I now live in a co-housing community. For the first time in my life, I have a studio.
Wow.
And I am ready to take it on and frustrated because of the distractions of continuing to care for the my teacher who is still alive, and I try to go and help her as often as I can. The responsibilities of being in co-housing
Right.
and um, being part of this new community.
Thank you for sharing that. And
That's learning.
yeah, I really appreciate it. And it's just the it's really great to sort of see this long trajectory of someone's life in art with success and failure and trauma and all of these things. So Jen, I really appreciate you ex sharing all of that with us because it reflects all of our lives, right? We all have a different version of that same story. And
Mhm.
it's not the story, right? The story is the things that happen, those neutral things that happen to every human being. Sometimes we make them happen, sometimes they happen to us, but it's how we react to them and how we handle them going forward in this process that determines how we feel about them. And really, the goal for all of this is that we want to feel like artists. It's not how much we make, how much we produce, and sometimes not even what we produce, but it's
Mhm.
how we feel about it. Because somebody might make a lot of beautiful art and feel like crap, or they might make just a few things that are pretty simple and feel fabulous about it.
Mhm.
Right. So it's all we have to really realize like how neutral all of this is. That it's our emotions and our mind and this abyss, right? That is the important part. And that's what we're going to continue to talk about over the next 2 days. How to manage that, what my sort of trajectory for you is. Okay, so thank you very much. I'm going to mute you real quick there. Thank you. And just before we leave, we don't have a whole lot of more time, but I also want to just mention that, this is what's happened to me. And I'm going to share my story or part of my story. Grew up Mormon. This will be the quick version, okay? Grew up Mormon, 7 kids in my family. Total, I was born the last day of the last year of the baby boom. December 31st, 1964. But grew up kind of as a Gen Xer, right? Went to school in the 80s, punk rock and new wave. Wanted to be a writer, but my dad was like, well, how are you going to make money doing that? So I went into advertising. Did advertising, majored in journalism and advertising at Brigham Young University. Married a Mormon punk rock skate punk drummer. We moved to San Francisco. We were going to live the artist life and be Mormon at the same time, which we did. Immediately, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't want to be married. There's my trap. I felt trapped. I was married for a year and a half and I was gone. Could not handle that. I was trying to avoid feeling trapped from my past. Went off on adventures, took my first drink of alcohol at age 24 or 25. Well, I'd tried it once before. Lived the life, became a writer, became a wine writer, dove right into that. Got married again, was married for 6 years, but again, same thing. Felt trapped. Partied, wrote about wine, partied, wrote about wine. Got a DUI. I was in jail for 3 days. That was my abyss. And the idea of all of this, when I look at all of this and look back on it, that was 10 years ago. I've been sober for 8 years now. So it happened like 9.5 years ago. Well, I guess it would happen like 8.5 years ago because, timing of everything. But that, I was in Seattle. Ironically, I was at the wedding show. I worked for the San Juan Islands Visitors Bureau, which was my mini myth, right? My great job. Had moved, gotten a divorce, moved to the island of San Juan Island, lived this beautiful life there, had a full-time job writing about the islands. Everything seemed great. Was living alone, perfectly happy. And went to the wedding show in Seattle. Ironically. Went to the trade show. Went to dinner after with my friend. Had a glass of wine. Had another glass of wine. Went to pull out from the cafe. Apparently, I was over the line. There was right in front of the cop station at 12th and Broadway. And the cop pulled me over, asked me if I'd been drinking. I said yes. It was Martin Luther King weekend. Just all of the circumstances ended up with me in jail for 3 days. The person who bailed me out is actually on this call. But that changed my life. I was there for 3 days. I was in that abyss. It was when Orange is the New Black was happening. And I was laughing at myself like that trickster, like that joker who had brought that mirror right up to my face. And I was able, thank God, at that moment, to lose my entitlement, to lose my pride, and to say, I am going to follow the suggestions that these wise people are telling me now. And the first thing was, when I was done, I went to an AA meeting when I got out 3 days later. So I went down that path and got sober. And suddenly, I realized what I had been avoiding. I had been avoiding becoming an artist. I wanted to be an artist my whole life, up to age 50. And when that happened, I realized that I had been partying and pretending I was a writer, and I was a writer. I had written 3 books. But a lot of that was about the world out there. It wasn't about this. So that part made me realize that I was partying and drinking and having fun to avoid feeling trapped. What I really needed to do was be trapped in my own art. I needed to trap myself in my own system. Like William Blake says, a man must create his own system or be enslaved by another man's. Okay. So I started making art for the first time after I got sober. And that has created everything in my life now: my journaling practice, my business, my art, another book that's been written, my writing group, my MFA, my certification in life coaching, and all of my trainings and everything, and my coaching program. So I just wanted to share that with you, just to sort of like let you know that, that shame, that feeling, that emotion, the wisdom of the abyss for me became the willingness to feel any emotion. So I am now willing to feel the shame of telling that story that I was arrested and in jail, because I think it helps people. And it's complete now, for me, complete freedom. I have that freedom of unburdening myself, right? And you hear people say this. This is what the internet is kind of about. But there's a freedom in it. But for me, the wisdom of the abyss was the willingness to feel shame, to feel pain, to feel discomfort of trying something and failing 100 times when I started painting. But once I got willing to feel failure, I started to make progress. So that's where we're ending today. We're ending right on time. I'm going to quit sharing and just open up the room to see if anyone has any more last comments.
I just want to say, if I may, I've known Shannon a long time, and I saw her live this story, and
And he bailed
um,
me out of jail.
I did, which I'm going to say I'd be pleased to, honored to do it again if I needed to, but maybe that's the wrong thing to say. Um,
Oh, I love it. No, it won't
so
happen
it
again.
just occurs to me, people say, do you practice what you preach? And it occurred to me while I was just thinking about this and listening to Shannon talk, is that she's preaching what she has practiced. So these, when she's lived this life, and I know a lot of you know Shannon well, and have, you're on this call, you're engaged with her, and know that good, she's a
Okay.
good coach. But she I've seen her do it in her life. So if anyone has any doubts, um, it I'm just going to repeat that she's preaching what she has practiced and continues to practice every day. So I'll just leave it at that.
Thanks, Kevin. I appreciate it. Kevin is my writing partner. We have a writing group that came from a lunch years ago when we were both sitting there whining about not writing. We went to lunch, and this is after, well, yeah, after this happened. And suddenly I'm making art and I'm starting to write and trying to do things, but I'm hitting these frustrations. We went to lunch and we were whining about it. And I said after, I'm like, Kevin, we're going to have a writing group. So we started our writing group. It's called the Co-Dependables. There's two of us, and we have met almost every Sunday for almost
Years.
7 years now, 6 years now,
No,
7 years. Yeah,
amazing.
crazy. So, anyway, thank you so much. We are going to move on. Any last comments or questions? Helpful session. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I'm excited to talk about the infinite game tomorrow. Okay, see you tomorrow. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.